that. Sorry about that. We had to go fix a technical difficulty so that the people on YouTube could hear me. Okay, so like I was saying talking about GRC and saying it's an integrated approach to managing an organization's overall governance, enterprise risk management, and compliance with regulations. Now, it ensures that these three critical functions work together rather than singularly. So, generally, what we're talking about is that GRC is a structure that makes sure that there is a flow and a relationship between the governance, risk management, and organizations' compliance to regulations and rules. So, the focus areas of the GRC triad is governance, risk management, and compliance. Now, what is governance? Governance is how the organization is directed and controlled. Okay, when we're talking about the governance, we're talking about the management of organizations, talking about industry heads, we're talking about regulatory bodies of certain industries and all that. Okay, now I'll give some instances like in our home country, which is Nigeria. I know that we're viewing from different places, but in our home country, Nigeria, when we say industry heads, example of such is the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is the industry head for all banks within the country. Okay, so when we're talking about um, complying with regulations, we're talking about banks, commercial banks, fintechs, and microfinance banks, whatever falls within that sector, complying with rules and regulations given by this industry head, which is the Central Bank of Nigeria. Okay. Now, risk management is a process, a continuous process. It does not stop. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks. Okay. Now, what are risks? You may ask me. I believe that that question has even been answered, Seth. I believe that question has been answered in your first class by the previous instructor, if I am not mistaken. Can somebody try to give me what to tell me what risks are? Somebody. Nobody. Wow. So risk are those things that could affect an organization or an industry negatively. Okay. Risk are those things that could affect an organization or an industry negatively. Okay. So when we're talking about risk, we talk about the likelihood of when we're talking about assessing risk, we're talking about the likelihood of these things to occur but multiplied by the impact that it is going to have in the organization. Okay, so when you've identified the risk, the next thing you do is assess it. And the process of assessing, you look at the likelihood times the impact. Okay, now when you say that the likelihood of a particular risk is low and the impact is going to have on a particular organization is also low, you can say it's a low level risk, right? But if the impact is going to have in the organization to the organization is high, and also the likelihood of it happening is high, then it's a high impact risk. Okay, so what you do is after you've assessed this, still in the process of assessment, that's evaluation and prioritization, that's the process of assessment. The next thing you do is you prioritize. Okay, now a lot of organizations may not have the resources to handle all the risk in their risk register at the same time. So what they do is they prioritize these risks and fix them based on the one with the highest risk score to the ones with the lowest risk score. And further in this course, we're going to be talking about the risk remediation strategies. We'll talk about how to fix these risks. Okay. So the next thing here is compliance. Compliance is adhering to laws, regulations, and internal policies. So what are these laws? What are these regulations? Like I said earlier, we have industry heads that give us regulations and laws that we must follow if we are going to do business within their jurisdiction. Apart from that, we still have um, standards and frameworks that also help us to follow to stay safe on this on the cyberspace. Okay, now some of these frameworks or standards rather includes the GDPR, the ISO 27001, also includes the NIST CSF, which is the NIST National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework. We have the PCI DSS, which is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. Now, these different frameworks depends on your industry and the kind of data you are managing. Okay, like PCI DSS, for instance, which is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, is mostly or strictly for people or organizations that handle payment card information. Okay, so moving forward, let's move forward. Okay, so we'll talk about the roles of the cybersecurity specialist. A GRC specialist is a professional responsible for designing, implementing, and maintaining an organization's GRC framework. Okay, they act as a bridge between business operations, executive leadership, and regulatory requirements. Their key responsibilities include framework development, risk assessment and monitoring, compliance management, and governance support. Okay, so let's look at these things one after the other. So when we say framework development, we're talking about the development of the policies that the organization is going to abide by, the development of the procedures that the organization is also going to be following when it comes to the cyber infrastructure. Okay, now an example of this is the most common and most important policy, which is the ISP, your information security policy. Okay, now this information security policy, please note the ISP is in respect to this is information security policy, not internet service provider. Yes, we have a lot of mix-ups like that sometimes, so I just thought I should clarify it. Okay, so the information security policy is the policy that carries rules and regulations regarding everything concerning security, cybersecurity in the organization. Within the ISP is where we have the acceptable use policy, we have the all the other policies fall within that. Okay, so policy framework development is part of the job specifications of the GRC specialist. The next is risk assessment and monitoring. Risk assessment and monitoring. Now, I've already said a lot about risk assessment and risk monitoring. So, what do we mean by risk monitoring? When you have successfully identified your risk, you have been able to use different remediation strategies. Let's talk about risk remediation strategies. Let's talk about risk remediation strategies. Okay. Risk reduction strategies includes risk reduction, risk avoidance, risk um, reduction, avoidance. There's also risk acceptance and risk transfer. When we go further in the course, we're going to explain it, go more in depth into it. Okay, so we have compliance management. Compliance management. Now, what is compliance in the first place? Before we talk about compliance management, what is compliance? Before we talk about compliance management, someone should try to give me an answer. Anybody, online, physically, what is compliance?
Following policies, rules, and regulations.
You said, sorry, I didn't get that.
Compliance is like following policies, regulations,
Okay,
rules, and
yes,
regulations.
yes, that's it. You're correct. So compliance is simply adhering to industry standards, policies, and industry regulations. Okay, internal policies, industry standards, and industry regulations. Okay, so when we're talking about policy management, we're talking about both creating the policies and enforcing the policies. Okay, enforcing the policy in a way that it wouldn't look like they are being enforced, but it will just flow with the normal working processes and procedures within the organization. That way, we are going to be making security a culture in the said organization. Okay, so moving on, the required skills of a GRC specialist. First, here we have regulatory knowledge, industry specific. Now, why we say industry specific is because there's regulatory knowledge for kind, different industries. Okay. Now, you might have regulatory knowledge for um, the banking sector, the financial industry, but you will not be able to audit the cybersecurity framework, structure, and policies of the health sector. I don't know if I'm making sense, if you're following. I'm making sense, right? Good. So that's how what we mean by regulatory knowledge. Now, the next is risk assessment methodologies. Okay, I've talked about risk assessments. So, what are the risk assessment methodologies? Does anybody here know? Anybody?
Silence of the panel.
Is there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I did not hear you.
You said
Okay, Ayo, your the place you are is kind of noisy, so I did not quite get you. Okay, we're going to. Okay, if you have any answer that you want to send it to the chat on YouTube. For those of us on YouTube, if you are not on YouTube, you can send it to WhatsApp. I will also check it here. I will also check it here.
risk assessment is nothing but like if we find out any incident, we have to identify first, then analyze, then evaluate, then monitor. As far as I know, I understood this one only risk assessment.
Okay, that's also very correct. Um, Give me a minute. Can we increase the volume of this TV? Where's the remote? Because I can barely hear them. Okay, so moving on. The next thing here after the risk assessment methodologies is data analysis and reporting. So, what kind of data do we think that a GRC specialist analyzes? What kind of data? You wanted to say something? Mhm. Oh no, I wasn't hearing much. Okay, yeah, you're correct. We have code violations, we have laws, we have documentations that have been given to them. You analyze them, you cross check what is written versus what is actually in what they are actually doing in the organization. So that's the data you analyze. Now we have stakeholder communication. Now, when we talk about stakeholder communication, first of all, we need to know who are the stakeholders in the organization. Okay, not all stakeholders are shareholders. Hope we know this. So, who are the stakeholders? Who are stakeholders? Somebody.
Expect IT team, except IT team.
Okay. Any other person?
Like,
Any other person? Customers are part of your stakeholders. Miriam, okay, let's have you.
the vendors, third party vendors.
I didn't get that.
Third party vendors.
Okay, vendors, yes. So generally, stakeholders are people that have anything to do with an organization. They include your industry heads. Like I've been using banking sector as an example. The CBN is a stakeholder in every bank, right? The customers of these banks are also stakeholders. People that anybody that does business with this bank are stakeholders. The staff of the bank are stakeholders. The shareholders of the bank are stakeholders. Now we have different types of stakeholders, right? We have the people that have um, a lot to lose, and also a lot that they have a lot of invested in the bank, and they have a lot of opinion on what happens in the bank. There are also people that have opinion on what happens in the bank, but they are not really vested in the bank. Example of these people are who your industry heads, right? Their opinion more is to, permit me to say this, is to make sure or look for loopholes where you are making errors so that they can find you and make money from you. Not necessarily, they are not really concerned with whether you are making profit or not, right? Now there are people that have a lot vested in these industries, but in this organization, but they don't really have a lot to say in the decision making of this organization. Okay, then there are people that don't have a lot vested and don't really have opinion in what happens in the organization. That's where our first customers fall under, right? Our shareholders, minority shareholders, have to them a lot vested, but they don't really have an opinion. Are we following? So those are the different type of stakeholders. So you need to know how to manage these four categories of stakeholders and how to keep them informed and in the loop of everything that's happening in the organization. Then we have project management, still part of the job of the GRC specialist. How is project management the job of one of the required skills of a GRC specialist? You know, setting up a GRC framework in an organization is a project. So you need to know how to go about the beginning phase, which is the planning phase, know how to go about the implementation phase, and know how to go about the monitoring phase, right? Which is post implementation phase. Okay, so these are some of the skills, required skills of the GRC specialist. Now we have audits and control frameworks. Okay, now the GRC specialist also audits organizations, whether you work within the organization, which is the internal audit team, or you are from an industry head, or you are just an external auditor. Okay, those are basically our three kinds of auditors: internal, external, and third party. Okay, those are our three types of auditors. So basically, these are some of the roles. Now, what when I say control frameworks, I'm talking about standards and frameworks that help this auditor to know how to go about cross checking, checkmating the organization. Okay, some of these frameworks here include ISO 27001 and ISO 30,000. These are different industry frameworks for information security, for ISMS, Information Security Management Framework, and the other for risk management. Okay, so moving on, we have the integrated GRC framework. Key components of GRC, integrated GRC framework. We have strategy and culture. Strategy and culture. When we talk about strategy and culture, we're simply talking about how to go about implementing these GRC frameworks or these policies, and culture. Not just implementing these policies, but also how to make it a culture in the organization, how to implement it without making it look like a hassle within the organization. Okay, making it look like normal working procedure and normal work processes. Okay, we following. Now we have people and organization. People and organization. Now, there's something we always say in cybersecurity, and I always say in tech generally. The human link in any setup is usually the what? Weakest link. The human link in any technological framework is always the weakest link. So, one of the things we need to do is to know how to handle that link correctly to make sure that it stays as strong as possible. When I say it's the weakest link, let me give an instance. We have policy, organizational policies that says, um, whenever you are coming to the office, make sure you what clock in, right? Why are we clocking in at the door? To make sure that everybody that enters into the building, and when guests are coming to you, give them guest tags, and they will also clock in when they are coming in. Are we making sense? What are we trying to do? We are trying to control whoever gets into our building, take records of everybody that we allow in, right? It's a policy, a company policy. But then, for instance, I forget my tag in the house and I come to the office and I'm like, I see a random person. Now, this organization I'm talking about might be very large. I'm like, sorry, I work in social department, I forgot my tag. I really just need to get in and do this, that. A human like me might be like, okay, let me just help you get in, right? Breaking company policy, doing good to a fellow colleague. Now, what if that colleague is not actually a colleague but just wants to get into the office? Do you know what you've done? You've let somebody else into the organization. So, what do we do? Part of the GRC framework policies or part of the jobs of the GRC person is to make sure that there is always trainings for the people to make sure that their actions always stay compliant with industry regulations and company internal policies. Okay, so the next is processes and controls. Before I come to processes, I want to ask, what are controls? What are controls?
Rules implemented.
Is it?
There are like guidelines, rules implemented.
Okay, you're not wrong. Miriam, is your hand up again?
So controls their actions put in place to manage or regulate how something works.
Okay, you're not wrong. Any other person? So let me say it. Controls are things that we put in place in order to checkmate risks. Controls are implementations to checkmate risk. We have different types of controls: administrative controls, technical controls, physical controls. Okay, those are the types of risks. Then the categories we have um, directive, we have preventive, we have corrective, we have compensational, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what are these kind of controls? Let me start with the technical controls. Technical controls are those things that we put in place to safeguard our technical infrastructure. Example, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, right? SIM tools, okay? All these things are things that we put in place to safeguard our site, our IT infrastructure. Okay, the next type of controls we have, that is the administrative controls. Okay, the administrative controls are those rules, those policies, those guidelines that the organization says that these are the things that we must do in order to avoid some certain things. There are control measures that are put in place. Okay, now we've done technical, we've done administrative, then the physical controls. Physical controls are the ones that everybody is used to. Example, having security guards at the front door, having the place fenced round, putting um, CCTV cameras everywhere to make sure that everything that happens, we are seeing them. Okay, these are the types of controls. Now, when we say categories of controls, and we're looking at now preventive controls. What are preventive controls? Preventive controls are things you use to stop certain things from happening in the first place. You don't allow them happen. Example of preventive control measures are the firewall I mentioned. Yes, it's a technical control, but it's also a preventive control. Okay. Another one is fences and security guards, stopping people from coming in. Now, these are physical controls, right? But they are also preventive controls. Now we have corrective controls. Corrective controls are things that we put in place to remediate things that have already happened. Example, having an incident response plan. It's an administrative control, right? But it's also a corrective measure. Okay. Then we have deterrence. Deterrence controls are things that you put in place to try to make people not to what's the word, to try to make people not to take certain actions that they ordinarily would, to try to make people not to. Let me give an example of deterrence control measure. When you want to enter a building and you see a house and you see very big beware of dogs, the fact that they are telling you that dogs are here will make you say, okay, let me not break into this one, let me try the next one. Are we following? Do we get it? Or the fact that you are just seeing armed security men walking around. Okay, try the next building. This one is okay. Then we also have compensational controls. What are compensational controls? Compensational controls are control measures you use when the actual one that is supposed to be working is not working. Example, you go to a bank, the doors are not working. What do they use? More security guards with scanners to check everybody. Why? The original man trap that they're supposed to use, it's not functioning. Okay? Say man trap or a vestibule. Man trap. Okay, so those are controls. Okay, now processes, on the other hand, are those things that we say when we want to do certain things in the organization, this is the way it is done. This is the normal working procedure, normal working processes. Okay, they are still kind of controls measures put in place. But now here's the thing: when you put controls as part of the normal working process of an organization, it helps to allow seamless integration of security. Makes it look like the normal working process is secure. Okay, thereby you are integrating cybersecurity and enforcing rules and regulations and enforcing policies, integrating GRC into the normal working process of the organization. Okay, so that's the relationship between the two. Now we have technology and data. When we talk about technology and data, we're talking about the infrastructure you use to save the information that is being collected. Okay, are we together? Infrastructure you put in place to manage your data. Okay, now moving on, we have measurements and reporting. When we talk about measurements, we talk about KPIs. What are KPIs? What are KPIs? Are you here? Are you here? What are KPIs? What is KPI? KPIs are key performance indicators. Okay, key performance indicators are things you use to checkmate your controls, when if they are working or not, things you use to checkmate policies if they are working or not, things you use to checkmate generally. Okay, to check the performance of um your your framework, your policies, your security generally. Okay, example of KPIs include what? Let's talk about simple KPIs. When we talk, you want to say something? Simple KPIs like MTTD. What does MTTD mean? Mean time to detect. Okay, MTTD, mean time to detect. MTTR, mean time to respond. Okay, now these are simple KPIs. When you put control measures in place and then there's a bridge, how long does it take before our infrastructure or our control measures detect this breach? And then our procedure and policies that we have put in place to respond to this breach, how long does it take to kick in? Okay, these are normal performance indicators. When you say that, okay, yeah, it took too long for us to detect this and also too long for us to respond to it, it means your control measures are not working the way they are supposed to. Okay, are we following? It means the control measures you put in place are not working the way they are supposed to. So you need to do what? review what you have already set up. And that's why I said that GRC framework is a continuous process. It's not something we just do and say we are compliant. Are we following? Okay, and I believe that my last statement has already explained the last line, which is what? Continuous improvement. Keep monitoring, keep checking your implementations, things you've implemented, keep trying to check in to see if you're compliant or you're non-compliant. Okay. Now it says here, do not fear the auditor who has reviewed 10,000 frameworks, but fear the auditor who has reviewed one framework 10,000 times. It was said by who? Some famous person. Okay, now that we know or have an idea of what GRC is, let's go in depth. Let's break it down. Let's talk about them one after the other. Okay, let's talk about one after the other. Under governance, we have, it says governance refers to the system of rules, practice, and processes by which an organization is directed and controlled. It encompasses the mechanism, relationships, and process through which authority is exercised. Okay, it says here mechanism, relationship, and processes. Mechanism, relationship, and processes. Now, we have what we call our governance structure. We have different types of governance structures. Okay, we have the one that one person oversees everything. We have governance structure that is managed by a board of directors, where decision making is not one person's job, but it is deliberated upon before a decision can be made. Okay, so that's just one of the things we're going to be looking at. Now we have board structure and responsibilities. Okay, I have a material here that I would like us to look at. I have a material here that I would like us to look at. Just give me a minute. Let me open it up. Okay. Sorry, it's taking a minute for me to find it, but we'll get it very soon. Case study profile. Okay, that's it. So what I want to show us is a case study profile for an organization that they will still give you an assignment on later. But I want us to just look at it and I want to use it to explain something. I want to explain the board structure and responsibilities from this material. Okay, just give it a minute. This is taking forever. Okay. Okay. Is it bold enough? Can you see it? Okay, so This is for Kestrel Logistics, a case study we're going to be using. Okay, organizational structure. This is the organizational structure and leadership of the organization. If you look at it closely, we'll see that we have clearly defined roles and responsibilities of each of the people. Now, the first person here is Amara Situma, CEO of the organization, right? Group Chief Executive Officer, overall strategy, board relations, and regional expansion. David Okoro, Chief Financial Officer, the CFO, Financial Management, Investor Relations, and Cost Governance. Then we have Grace Wanjiru, VP, Supply Chain and Logistics. Tunde Balogun, Director of IT and Security. Now, if you check this, you'll realize that for every person, they have clearly defined roles and clearly defined responsibilities. Okay? Now the reason why this is important is for first of all division of labor, of course. Then secondly, to know who is responsible for what. In case of a bridge, in case of an incident, we know who is the owner of that particular issue that we are having, who is responsible for managing it, and who is responsible for responding to it. Okay, are we clear? Do we understand? So this is just one of the things we're going to be looking at now. Technology and vendor ecosystem. Don't worry, we'll look at this material again. Let me just minimize it. So when we talk about board structure and responsibilities, that is basically what we are talking about. Okay. Then the organizational structure is still related. When everybody knows their role and their responsibilities, we will understand how the organization is structured. Now, some organizations like this Kestrel, we saw that we have a CEO, a CFO, and also a CTO. It means that for different decisions, we have different people that are responsible for attending to them. Okay, that brings us to the next, which is policy and procedure. Oh, let me skip that for a bit. That brings us to decision making framework. Okay, so for decision making framework, we have any problem? For the decision making framework, we have sorry about that. So for our decision making framework, the next step, we have different people responsible for taking different decisions, right? So that's what I was driving at. Then the next is stakeholder management. All these are the roles and the responsibilities of governance. These are the key elements of corporate governance. Now let's go back to policies and procedure. Now, for policies and procedures, we need to understand that every policy made, every policy suggested, right? Because we cannot impose some certain policies on the organization. It needs to go through the governance, and they are the ones that are to approve what policies we are using and what policies we are not to use. GRC experts, your job in this aspect is to what give informed advice to the organization. Okay, emphasis on what? Informed. You need to know so that you advise them based on industry regulations and also industry requirements. Okay, so moving on, talking about governance best practices, we need regular board evaluations. Also, regular board evaluations, what are they evaluating? They are evaluating your KPIs, your performance indicators, to know what is working and what is not working, and also need to know what they need to do better as an organization. Then we have independent internal audit function. Independent internal audit function. Now, when we're talking about independent internal audit, we're talking about people within this organization that are employed as GRC auditors. Their job is to continuously monitor frameworks, continuously monitor processes, continuously monitor policies, and continuously make sure that organization processes and procedures aligns with industry standards and frameworks that they are supposed to comply with. Okay. Okay, now we have transparent financial reporting. Transparent financial reporting is part of the job of governance. Okay, you give financial reports to the other stakeholders that are not necessarily shareholders. Because from what we can see here, we'll realize that the governance, they are part of of the stakeholders, right? The governors are part of the stakeholders, but they are mostly the people that have the higher say of what can happen in the organization, and also have a lot vested in the organization. Okay, let's get that clear. So when we say things like the other people that also have a lot vested but don't really have a lot to say in what is happening in the organization, the governance is responsible for giving them reports because they need to know what is happening in this organization. Also, they are part of the stakeholders. They need to know. Okay, are we following? Okay, now we have strong ethical culture from top to bottom. Strong ethical culture from top to bottom. Now, strong ethical culture, we're talking about good ethics, right? We know what ethics are. We're talking about upholding the cybersecurity structure from the top. You won't say that because you are part of the governance, the policies do not apply to you. They do. When the people beneath you that work under you see that even the bosses, the CEO, the CTO, the CFO are still complying to industry rules and industry regulations, they will have no choice but to conform. The reason is they see you do it. You are practicing what you preach or preaching what you practice, right? So it makes it easier for other people to conform. Now we have the last but not the least is stakeholder inclusion decision making. Stakeholder inclusion decision making. Now we know that you are the governors of the company, you are the ones in charge of everything that is happening in this organization. But when serious decisions want to be made, you involve other stakeholders of this organization. Now I gave the four different types of stakeholders, right? High, 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 low, low, high, low, low. High, high, high vested, high, is it high vested and high impact, low vested, high impact, low vested, low impact, low vested, high impact. Okay. So those are the four categories of stakeholders. Those are the four categories of stakeholders. So we need to keep them in the loop. Let them know what's happening in in the organization, and also involve them in decision making. Right. So the next is okay. I think that's that about governance. Does anybody have any questions based on this before I move into risk management? Any questions? Online, Daniel, Miriam, Shiva.
I have no question.
Okay.
I'm okay.
Okay. In the absence of any question, I will move into risk management. So I've already talked a little on this in the introduction, so let's dive right into it. What is risk management? We have it here that it is the process of identifying, assessing, and controlling threats to organizations' capital, organizations' earnings, and organizations' operations. It involves understanding uncertainties, making informed decisions, and optimize making decisions, informed decisions to optimize risk and return trade-offs. Okay, so first off, I've explained what risk is, but I'll go into it again. I'll give an illustration so that we can understand what risk, threats, and vulnerabilities are. Okay, risk, threats, and vulnerabilities. Now, what illustration should I use now? Let me use this one. Imagine you have a let's stop here. Imagine you step outside your gates, hmm, and you see $1 million cash just sitting there, and then they tell you, oh, it belongs to so so person, let's not touch it. That money, the fact that it is sitting in front of our house is at risk of being stolen. Obviously not by us. I mean, We are ethical people. We all have good ethics. Don't now. We all have good ethics. So we are definitely not a threat to that money. We are not going to steal it. Although it is at risk of being stolen by other people, definitely not us, right? Am I communicating? It is at risk of being stolen by other people that are now the fact that other people can steal it, that makes them a threat to the person that owns the money. And the money is at risk of being stolen by the who? The threat. Do we understand the difference between risk and threat? Now, because I don't want these people to be able to easily steal it, what do? I keep it somewhere in a vault. But I mean, iron vaults are pretty expensive. So what do? I call a very good carpenter to make a big wooden box for me to keep this cash inside. That box, because it is wooden, not strong enough to a lot of equipment, right? The fact that the box is wooden is a vulnerability that the threat actor can easily exploit to still move, or no, not move, to still steal that money. Are we following? Do we understand this analogy? So what I'm simply saying is the money is our information. The vault is the infrastructure and everything that we put in place to make sure that that information, that data stays safe. But if there are vulnerabilities in your security setup or your security structure, a threat actor can always find these vulnerabilities and exploit them to still actualize the threat. Am I clear? So now we know what risk is, or at least we have an idea of what risk is. We have an idea of what vulnerability is. We have an idea of what threat is. Good. So moving on, we said uncertainties and making informed decisions to optimize risk returns trade-off. Okay, so when we talk about risk returns trade-off, we're talking about one simple thing. When we are fixing vulnerabilities, when we are fixing risk, when we are trying to assess risk, right? The process of assessing the risk, is it, or the process of mitigating this risk, is it worth it? Is the risk that we are going to what's the word, is the threat to the risk, right, what the mitigation strategy we are going to implement? Is it worth it? Okay, are we going to, let me use layman terms, are we going to spend more money fixing or mitigating this risk than if we actually allow the threat actor to actualize his threat? We need to balance it. We cannot spend $20 million safeguarding $150,000. Doesn't make sense, right? So that's what we mean by the risk return trade-offs. Okay, now for that reason, we have different types of risk remediation. We'll go into that when we're talking about risk treatment. Okay, now what are the steps of the risk management or the process of risk management? We have the step one is the risk identification. Okay, when you have identified, when you know what you're safeguarding and what the industry you are, you will have not an idea, you will have in-depth knowledge of your potential threats, right? When you know your potential threats and what they are after, you will know what is at risk in your organization. Now, when you have been able to successfully identify this risk, the next thing you do is what? Risk assessment. Like I said earlier in the class, risk assessment is likelihood times what? Impact. That gives us our risk score. Okay. Now, if the likelihood of a particular risk is high and the impact of that risk is also high, we have a risk score that is what? Critical. Okay. But if the likelihood is low and the impact is also low, We have what? Low. It's something that we can keep and fix later, right? So after assessing, the next one is prioritization. We prioritize them based on their risk scores. The ones that have the highest risk score are the ones that are critical, severe, or high, are the ones you attend to first before moving to the other ones. Okay. Now, let's talk about risk treatment. Oh, I forgot to say this. We have what we call a risk register, right? I think I have a risk register here. I'll show it to you guys soon. We have what we call a risk register. Okay. Now, what is a risk register? All identified risks are taken down, right? While you assess them, you also put their likelihood, you put in their impact, you let us know their risk score. Okay? After you've done that, on the risk register, you prioritize them based on their risk score. So you know the ones that you have worked on, the ones that you have not worked on, the ones that are still mitigated, and the ones that you still need to work on. Now, the reason you have a risk register is simple. Some risks you mitigate them after you've done mitigating it. After a while, they will come up again. Why? Technology keeps changing. Okay, and the implementation plan you use for a particular kind of risk 4 years ago might not work for that same risk 4 years later. Okay, let me give an example. You used face ID. The face ID was first introduced on which iPhone? iPhone X, right? Now, the first face ID that was introduced did not use proof of liveness. So if I should just have a picture of you and unlock it, it does not detect whether you're alive or you are just an image. As long as it sees the face, it unlocks. Now, prior to that, they use that liveness detection as what as okay, yeah, we don't need fingerprint anymore, right? We can just scan the face and still biometrics. We can still use it as for authentication purposes. Now, they've been able to handle authentication using biometrics. But as that came up, they said, okay, now we need to test for liveness. Next thing that happened is what is okay, it's been trending for a while now, is what we call deepfakes, right? Where you feed your face to somebody else's feed your face to a camera, then the output to somebody else's, and then they used to use that to also uh, go through pass the authentication test. Okay, but now there is what we call deepfake detection. So if you try to use it, it will not work. It will detect that this is a deepfake. Are we seeing? What they are trying to do is authentication. They put the first one. It was working. People found a way around it. Second way to make it work. People have found a way around it. Third way to make it work. Give it 2, 3 years. People, humans, will still find a way around it. This is why when you have a particular, when you've made your risk register, and then you have found a way to fix the risk or remediate the risk, you need to continuously monitor it. Don't just leave it there and say, remediated, on to the next one. We continue monitoring. Okay, that's for risk assessment. Now we have risk treatment. Now we have different risk treatment strategies. What are they? Anybody? Anybody? Online, physically, risk transfer,
Acceptance.
risk acceptance. You said?
Um, Avoidance.
Risk mitigation.
Risk mitigation, that's reduction. Okay. And you said
Avoidance.
avoidance. Okay. Those are the four: risk mitigation slash reduction, risk transfer, risk avoidance, and risk acceptance. Okay, let's talk about each of them one after the other. What is, let me start from the mitigation. What is risk reduction or risk mitigation? This is the process of reducing the likelihood or the impact of a particular risk. Likelihood or impact. If you can reduce the likelihood or impact to an acceptable range, right, then you have been able to successfully mitigate or reduce the risk. Now we said, so I said something like the risk having a likelihood and and the impact. If the likelihood is high and the impact is high, and you have been able to successfully reduce the likelihood to low, reduce the impact to maybe say medium, right? We realize that that same risk that was high critical has dropped to low or medium low, somewhere around that range. Okay, let me give a simple instance. You have a server, you've not installed a firewall, the server is just open for anybody within an organization or outside the organization to access. The possibility of data exfiltration, which is stealing of data from that server, is what? High. The likelihood is high. The impact is also high. So what do? You bring in a firewall. What's the job of the firewall? I said that in the last class, right? I don't know, most of us were not here in the last class. The job of a firewall is to filter incoming and outgoing traffic. Now you've been able to say, okay, we are only going to work on what is coming inside. Going to be able to filter what is coming into the network and also filter what is leaving the network. Do you get? That way, not everybody can access that particular server again. What have you done? You have been able to reduce the likelihood of data exfiltration. You've not done anything to the impact, right? You just reduced the likelihood. Because now you are monitoring and deciding who has access to this data and who does not have access to this data. Okay? You've reduced the likelihood. Now, the next thing we'll do is, okay, we've reduced the likelihood. Now let's do what we call FDE. I think previously we've discussed that. The previous instructor talked about that. Let's do what we call FDE. What's FDE? Full disk encryption. Right? Why we are doing the full disk encryption is to make sure that even if the likelihood is now low, so even if somebody gets access to this server from outside the network and steals information from that server, takes it out, we know what encryption does. It makes data that is supposed to be in plain text, turns it to ciphertext, makes it look like gibberish, something they cannot understand. So even if they steal it, the data is useless to them. So what have we now done? We have reduced the impact of data exfiltration. We have reduced the likelihood and also reduced the impact. So something that was critical before has now become what? Low. Do we understand? Okay, so that's that about risk reduction. The next one we are going to explain is risk transfer. What is risk transfer? Risk transfer is something very easy from the name itself.
Transferring the risks to somebody else.
Actually, yes. Although you use the name to define it, but yeah, you're correct. Instead of you to bear the burden of whatever happens if a threat regarding that risk is actualized, you give the problem to another person. As simple as that. Let me give an instance. Um, I don't know. How many of us are familiar with high stake investments, like high stake sports investments? Sporty bets. So, okay, that's still on that, yeah. How many of us are aware that if you want to deposit on these sport betting platforms, right, you are transferred to a third party application, right? Adrian, I'm communicating. You are transferred to a third party platform. It could be OPay, Flutter,
Optimum.
is that
Optimum.
Optimum Pay. You see these platforms. Now, these platforms are not owned by the sports betting platform. They are a different organization entirely. But because they don't want to have access to your card information, your account information, they don't want anything to do with your financial information. What do? They transfer the whole risk of managing your financial information data to another party. Yo, Miriam, you want to say something?
Yes. Your volume has reduced like really low.
My what has reduced?
Your volume.
Oh, my bad. Can you hear me? Can you hear me better now?
No, it's still the same. It's
Wow.
like
Hold on. Let me check
I don't
some.
know if anyone else is getting this problem.
Let me check something here. Testing. One, two.
Yes,
Okay.
it's better now.
Okay. So, like I was saying, the fact that they've been able to transfer the whole issue of them managing your card information and all that to somebody else is an example of risk transfer. Okay, is also like having insurance. Also, insurance is the type of risk transfer. You transfer the whatever, but if it happens, it's not on me, it's on somebody else. Okay, that's risk transfer. So now we know reduction and we know transfer. The next is risk acceptance. What is risk acceptance? When you've checked the implication of the risk and also the impact of the risk is low, the likelihood of the risk is also low, and then if peradventure you want to still reduce it further, the cost implication, I'm using cost implication now, is way higher than the impact of that risk. What do? You let go, you accept it, bring it, no problem. If it happens, it happens. Okay, that's risk acceptance. Now, the last but not the least is what? Avoidance. You didn't take notes. You didn't write it down. Is it here? I said it. I said the four of them. You didn't take
And I
notes.
told you you're going to address. I mean, the example is better. So giving examples.
Okay, no problem. So the last risk treatment is what? Risk avoidance. What is risk avoidance? Risk avoidance is simply saying, instead of me to put myself inside or my organization inside this thing that is going to cause this risk, I will completely avoid the practice that will bring that risk to me. An example, we know we still have analog microfinance banks, very analog. They use paper, pen, and probably they have systems in their office that they use strictly for sending emails and typing. Yes, we have microfinance banks like that that still operate, to shock you. They exist. So when you they now say, okay, let us go digital. Let's try to even go digital. And then they see that they are introducing themselves to a new risk landscape that they are not ready to either reduce the risk, transfer it. What will they do? Please let me stay where I am. Okay? What they have done is they have avoided the risk completely and say, we're not doing it again. Are we together? So those are our four risk treatment strategies. Okay? Now, after we are done identifying our risk, setting up our risk register, assessing the risk, prioritizing the risk, doing our risk treatment. The next thing we do is what? Risk monitoring. Very important, very necessary, and I think I've said why earlier, and I'll repeat myself. The reason is because when a risk is treated, mitigated, or avoided, or whatever, it does not stay like that forever. It does not stay like that forever. Give Nigeria a few years. Give Nigeria a few years. They will soon implement rules that all microfinance banks must be digitalized. And I think they're already working on it. So no matter how much you try to avoid it, they are going to force them into it. And when they go into it, if they are not ready to avoid the risk, they are going to have to do one thing, which is what? Shut down, which is also still risk avoidance, actually, if you look at it in a way. If you look at it in a way, it's still risk avoidance. We don't want to digitalize, so we just decide not to work entirely. Still avoidance. Okay? So those are our risk treatment strategies. Now the next is okay, monitoring and reporting. Now, after you've mitigated this risk, you've treated all this risk, you monitor them to make sure they stay mitigated. Okay, and then you have your reports. Your reporting is basically to tell us our risk, all our risk scores, the ones that are still. Oh, I didn't mention our risk appetite. Is it in the material? Let me know. Okay, it's not. Now, there's someone who call the risk appetite. What is your risk appetite? Anybody?
The amount of risks you're willing to accept.
Thank you. It's the amount of risk you are willing to accept. It's the amount of risk you are willing to accept. Okay, so your risk appetite is okay. I can, if this should happen, I can take it, but I cannot take more than this. Every organization should have um, their stated risk appetites to know what they can accept and what they cannot accept, and always try to go below what they can accept. Okay, stay afloat. Okay, so that's that about that. Now let's talk about different risk categories and examples of these risk categories. We have the first one, which is what? The strategic risk. Examples of strategic risk include market competition, M&A risk, and business model disruption. We know what market competition is, right? We know what market competition is, right? Do we know what market competition is?
Market position.
Market competition. Not market position. What is my forex class? Okay. Market competition. Give an answer now. Give an answer. Say something. Okay. So market competition generally, we're talking about your every industry does not have just one player. In every industry, there are multiple players. Okay, so strategic risk are risks that comes from your competition, your competitors, your competition. Okay, now when we're talking about market competition as a risk, we're talking about them doing things that might possibly shift customers from you to the other end, to the end, right? So this is a strategic risk, and risk you have to also keep. Hello, bring it down. A risk we also have to keep in check. You also try to always know what your competitor is doing so that you know what to do better. Now, the next is M&A risk. M&A is merger and acquisition. Merger and acquisition risk. Okay. Now, talking about M&A risk, we're talking about the risks that may come into your organization if you acquire or merge with another organization. Let me give an instance. We all know there was a Diamond Bank and there was an Access Bank, and then they merged. Some of us here might know that there was a Standard Trust Bank and there is still a UBA. and they merged and became UBA. Is it? They merged and became UBA. Now, the cost of the merger we might not know, but what we do know is that there are risks that they might have that UBA might have inherited from Standard Trust Bank based on their own practices, what they do that may differ in some way. Yes, they are in the same industry, so and they have the similar policies, not identical. Reason is they have the same rules and regulation that they are adhering to and stuff like that. But Standard Trust Bank might have had some risks that are in its register that it is accepting, but if they add it to what UBA currently has, it might increase these risk scores. So these are what we call examples of strategic risk. Now we have financial model disruption. Okay, what is financial model disruption? You want to say something? Okay, financial model disruption is just simply talking about the financial infrastructure of the organization. Okay, the financial structure of the organization, right? Now, anything that disrupts the way finances is being disbursed and dispensed within the organization will most definitely affect the strategic position of that organization. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Now we have operational risk. Examples of operational risk are what? Process failure, supply chain disruption, and human error. Process failure, supply chain disruption, and human error. Now, we have processes that we put in place to help guide organization and all that. If a process should fail, it is an example of operational risk. Example of process failure is, let's say you have a third party that you always shift to when you are doing some certain when you are doing some certain processes in the organization. Example of this is, for instance, you are a bank. You when you want to move when your customers are doing a transfer from this bank to another, there's a cloud platform that is responsible for moving this money, right? We have a lot of them. I'm not going to mention any names because I'm not doing free ads for anybody. We have a lot of them. But now, if the one that you are using as an organization should have a should fail, and is not working at a particular point in time for whatever reason, either hardware difficulty, cloud difficulty, whatsoever the reason is, and then you're trying to use that service, that generally that's an example of process failure because it follows a process, but the process is not usable at that particular point in time. Okay, I have my moderators telling me that it's time to go on break. So what's going to happen is I'll be going on break now, and then in the next 15 minutes, we'll be back to continue the class. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back. I think we're right on time. So I'll just start from the beginning of the slide again so that we can follow up from here. So we're talking about risk categories and examples of these risk categories. We have the strategic risk, which is examples are the market competition, the M&A risks, and the business model disruption. Okay, anything that disrupts the way a business is run is a business model disruption. M&A risk is for merger and acquisition risk, acquiring risk from organizations when you merge with them or when you buy over these organizations. Then market competitions are risks that come from your competitors within the same industry. Okay, example of operational risk are process failures, and I think I've already been able to explain what process failures are. Process failure could be from normal working procedures in the organization and something happens to it. It could be from hardware malfunction, right? Infrastructure malfunction, hardware failure. That these are the things that can cause process failures. Then we have the supply chain disruption. Supply chain disruption is, for example, you have an issue with your third party vendors, right? People that you that supply you, give you some certain services or give you some certain hardware. There's a disruption in their service. This could cause supply chain disruption. Then we have the human error. Human error is caused by normal mistakes from people. Okay, or mistakes from people. Okay, so the next is financial category, the financial risks. We have credit risk, liquidity risk, and market volatility. Okay, for credit risk, we're talking about um, risks that comes from your creditors, people that now business always has creditors and debtors, right? Debtors are people that owe you, your creditors are people that you are owing. Business is not done one way, okay? So your credit risk are could be from either your creditors or your debtors. Now, people you give credit to might put the business at financial risk if the credit is above your what risk appetite. Okay. Now I talked about risk appetite earlier. We'll talk about it again later. Okay. Now we have the liquidity risk. What is liquidity risk? Liquidity risk is talking about the possibility of business of financial liquidation. When we talk about liquidation, we're talking about running out of finance, running out of money entirely in the organization. Okay, that's the kind of risk. Now we have the market volatility risk. Market volatility risk is talking about the way prices fluctuate. Sometimes what can affect the organization might be the fluctuation in exchange rates can also affect volatility, market volatility risk. Okay, now we have compliance risk, and this is the one that really concerns us. Okay, compliance risk. Now we have regulatory penalties, legal actions, and license revocation. What we say regulatory penalties? We're simply saying that if for any reason you do not comply with the rules, regulations of your industry or you of the industry, right? They will penalize you. Penalization could be from um, fines. It could be from fines. It could be from suspension of business. It could be for a lot. There could be different penalties depending on the level of the non-compliance. Right now, the next is legal actions. Now, when we say legal actions, we're talking about when you don't comply with, or you don't honor a particular agreement, you could get sued, go to court, and this could affect the reputation of the organization. Okay, that's for legal actions. Then we have license revocation. Like I said, license revocation is the highest form of regulatory penalties. The highest form of regulatory penalties. Okay, now, if for any reason your license is revoked, it simply means you can no longer practice in that region that they revoked your license from. Example, do I have any examples? No, I don't. Okay, so let's move on to reputational risk. One, we have brand damage, social media crisis, and customer trust loss. Now, you see, this reputational damage could be caused by any other kind of risk. Let me give an instance. If, for example, a prominent individual should um, sue an organization, it can damage the reputation of that organization. Now, it could damage the reputation of that organization in the sense that people will lose trust in the organization because of the legal action that has been taken against them, the lawsuit that has been taken against them. And for that reason, it will damage the brand. And if it damages the brand, they will lose customers, to affect the finances of the brand, to affect the business in general. Okay. Now we have social media crisis. Now there's something we do in Nigeria very well. I'm sure that people in other African countries will agree. In Nigeria, we know how to drag brands on social media if they do not meet up to their expected to an expected service that they are supposed to give. Okay. Now, if you go ahead on social media and drag these brands, that's what we say we drag these brands. If you drag these brands on social media, it will affect the reputation of the brand. And if it should affect the reputation of the brand, they will lose customers, definitely lose customers. And the fact that they are losing customers and losing business for a period of time will affect them financially and will affect the brand generally, or the organization generally. Now we have customer trust loss. If this should happen, any of the either reputational or other compliance um, risks should occur, it will definitely makes some customers to lose trust in these brands. Okay, so that's that. Now we have the technology cyber. This technology risk, or the cyber risk, includes data breaches, ransomware attacks, and system outages. What is a data breach? A data breach is said to have occurred when somebody that is not supposed to have access to some certain information gets access to this information and exfiltrates them. Okay? Gets access to your information and steals them. That's a data breach. And it is a serious risk. Why is it serious? Because that action can cause some other risks to come forth. Example, it can cause the industry heads to penalize you for not taking necessary precautions to secure the data of your customers. It can also cause reputational damages and make people to lose trust in this organization. Okay, data breaches. It could also make um well, basically those two. There are different things that could occur from data breaches, right? Now the next is ransomware attack. What is a ransomware? Anybody? Anybody online, physical? Shivaraju, you've not answered. Have you answered any question today? What is a ransomware attack? Somebody.
Ransomware is they will hold our data and they will demand for some money. That's called ransomware.
Okay, I will not lie, I did not get you, but let me explain it. Okay, a ransomware is a type of malware that when it gets into your system, it does it encrypts your files and does not allow you to be able to access your own files, right? Until you pay a certain ransom. It could be in crypto, it could be you make a payment for you to be able to access your own files. Now, it's a lot like kidnapping, but the difference is this: kidnapping is you take a human being and keep human being that belongs to a family and keep, and they ask the family to bring money before you release the human, right? On the other hand, a ransomware attack is collecting somebody's files, encrypting them. They can't access it until they pay a certain ransom before they will be given access to their file, before they may be given access to their file. Because in some cases, they will keep asking for ransom, take the money higher and take it higher until you eventually get tired of paying and they will not still release these files. Okay, that's a ransomware. Okay, they will have system outages. This could be by hardware failure or whatever. But when this happens, it affects the organization negatively. Okay. Now, example of system outages could occur when you want to use a certain service that is given to you by a certain organization, and then you see that you cannot use that service. Now, the fact if that service is out for too long, or it keeps having you keep having system outages often, you will realize that your customers will switch to a competitor that has that service fully figured out and working. Okay, so these are different risks that we want to avoid. Now, this last one is the one that we cannot do anything about, which is what environmental, like climate change, natural disasters. Okay, so if there is going to be an earthquake somewhere, there is really nothing you can do about it. So when it happens, what you need to do is the only thing you can do about it is have your business continuity, to have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. BCDR, business continuity disaster recovery. Have a business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan. Now, this plan will automatically you automatically put it into play the moment you find out that this particular disaster has happened. So if you are in a region that is prone to natural disasters and stuff like that, you should have a plan in place in case of the natural disasters. Okay, now we have different types. We have different ways we plan for this. We'll talk about that when we're doing disaster recovery and business continuity and disaster recovery. Okay, so that's that for environmental. Now, climate change could occur probably still under natural disasters, things you don't expect, on very heavy wind, rain, a hurricane, destroying things and that we did not plan for. Okay, so these are part of environmental risk that nobody really wants to happen, but you should still have a plan to be able to recover from these things in case they eventually occur. Okay, so moving on. Does anybody have any question for me from here? Any question? Should I go on? Give me a thumbs up if you want me to go on. No questions. Okay, I will be moving on. So, still under risk management, we're going to be talking about the different risk management frameworks. Okay, now the first one here is ISO 31000. Now, what is ISO? ISO is an international standard organization, right? They are responsible for giving us frameworks to follow for different kind of organizations, but there are some that we adopt in cybersecurity because they directly concern us. They have other ISO frameworks for and other ISO standards for different things that do not really concern technology or cybersecurity, but we are going to focus on the ones that affect us. Okay, the first one here is ISO 31000, right? Yes, ISO 31000. Now, ISO 31000 is a risk management guideline. Now, a frameworks generally are guidelines that we follow to help us to perform certain procedures. Okay. Now, for this particular one, ISO 31000, it's a framework that helps us with risk management. Risk management. Okay. So when you want to set up your risk management policy and procedures in your organization, you have to align the processes and align the procedures with the ISO 31000 framework. Okay, so that it helps your procedures and policies to align with international standards. Okay, are we together? Are we together? Now, the ISO 27001 is the next framework. ISO 27001, I think I've made mention of it before. It is for ISMS, which is Information Security Management Systems. Okay? Information Security Management System. What is that? It is a framework or a set group of guidelines that helps us set the minimum requirements to or the minimum setup that we're going to use to handle information security. Now, when I say information security, I'm talking about safeguarding people's information, safeguarding data. Okay, minimum requirements, minimum policies to safeguarding data. So ISMS is generally concerned with safeguarding information and safeguarding data, right? Now we have the NIST. Now, NIST is National Institute for Standards and Technology. Okay, National Institute for Standards and Technology. Similar to ISO, they are an organization that sets guidelines also for managing not just cybersecurity, different sectors. But the NIST framework we're going to be really considering is what? NIST CSF, which is the NIST Cyber Security Framework. Okay. Now, the NIST cybersecurity framework has um, six core functions. I think yes, six core functions. Okay, the first core function will be governance. First core function of the NIST CSF is governance. Then we have the second is identify. I think I'll just stand up and write this on the board. Here is the marker.
The next is National
Institute of Standards and Technology. Let me get up. So NIST is NIST. That's the National Institute of Standards rather, and Technology. Okay, this is NIST CSF. So this is what NIST stands for. Now, the core functions include: first is governance, second is identify, third is detect, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. I'll take it again for those of us that are writing down. Governance, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Okay, so that's for the NIST CSF. I'll break it down.
All this are under the list.
NIST CSF, NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Yes. So I'm going to just break it down real quick. We already know what governance is, right? Industry heads and organizational heads, right? Now, the identify is talking about identifying your general infrastructure, right? Identifying everything in the organization so you know what you want to protect. The protect is setting up controls, putting controls in place to protect what you have identified, the risk you have identified. Because after you've identified the key infrastructures, you now know identify the risk that is that they are prone to, right? The risk that they are prone to. After you've identified them, the next thing is you protect them by putting controls, measures in place to handle those risks, right? Now, after you've done the protect, the next is detect. Like what we say in cybersecurity, there is nothing like 100% security, right? Good. So when you've done the protect, you put measures in place to detect. In case of a breach, in case of an intrusion, in case one of your measures fails, you can always detect that something has happened and also then takes us to the next one, which is to what? Respond. Now, after you've been able to detect the issue, there should already be policies and procedures in place to respond to these possible issues. There should be policies in place or procedures in place to respond to these issues, right? Now, after you respond, the next is to recover. Now, recover is talking about getting us back to normal working procedure, getting us back to normal working procedure, using bringing in our backup plans, bringing in everything so that we are back to our normal working procedure. So that's that for NIST. Okay, I said a lot on it already. So the next is FAIR, which is factor analysis and information risk. Okay, this is another policy that also helps us to another framework rather that also helps us to set policies to analyze our information risk, our risk, the risk that our info that we have are prone to. Now let's talk about the risk, um, key risk matrix, right? Let's talk about the key risk matrix. The first one is risk appetite and risk exposure. Okay, what is risk appetite? Risk appetite is talking about how much risk you are willing to take, how much risk you are willing to allow happen, right? That's your risk appetite. Now the next is your risk exposure. Risk exposure is what you actually stand to lose, the risk you are actually exposed to. Okay, the risk appetite is what I can take. Risk exposure is what is most probably going to happen. Okay, so let's define them one after the other. It says risk appetite is the amount and type of risk an organization is intentionally prepared to accept in pursuit of its goals, while risk exposure is the total level of risk an organization is currently subject to based on assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. Okay, that is the difference between the two. Now, further, we say risk appetite is strategic and intentional, while risk exposure is operational and current. That is, the risk appetite is set by leadership, board, as a policy threshold, meaning this from our policy, this is what we can take. But on the other hand, the risk exposure is measured in real time based on real time world conditions. Okay, okay. Now the quick question here is for risk appetite. How much risk are we comfortable taking? How much risk are we comfortable taking? While for risk exposure is how much risk are we actually carrying right now? Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Your risk exposure at any given point in time should not be more than your risk appetite. Okay, now in cybersecurity context, Risk appetite is deciding to tolerate up to, give or take, 4 hours of, this is just an example, 4 hours of critical service downtime, or 50,000 in unmitigated fraud loss per quarter. Now, this fraud loss per quarter is something that we could mitigate, but let's say per quarter it will cost us more than that $50,000. So, okay, we are ready to take it. But for risk um, exposure, we can have an example of operating 20 unpatched legacy servers exposed to the internet, creating a potential financial impact of $500,000 if exploited. Now we are seeing that our um, risk appetite is way less. It's just about 10% of our actual risk exposure. So we need to find a way to mitigate this exposure in a way that it will be below our actual risk appetite. Is it clear? Is it clear? Do we get it? Okay, so moving on. The next thing here is our what? Control effectiveness rating. Okay, control effectiveness rating. So what is control effectiveness rating? It is what we use to evaluate how well a specific internal control reduces the likelihood or impact of an identified risk. Okay, it bridges the gap between inherent risk and residual risk. What is inherent risk? Inherent risk is the risk that we are currently facing, what we currently have, while residual risk is the risk that is remaining after we have mitigated or treated all the other risk. Okay, so generally speaking, it just helps to control the effectiveness of the rating of the risk we have and the risk that is left. Okay, good. So the moving on, the core dimension of this control effectiveness rating is basically into two primary aspects. We have design effectiveness and operational effectiveness or operating effectiveness. Now, design effectiveness is the control designed correctly to achieve the intended objective. Okay, here we're talking about designing our controls or implementing our controls in order to actually mitigate this risk, while operational effectiveness is the control operating consistently over time, designed and evidenced by audit artifacts. Now, what we are saying here is this: the design that we are putting in place, how is it going to be effective? That's the design effectiveness. Then the operating effectiveness, okay, we've designed it is effective. How long will it be effective if we put it into operation? Okay, good. So that's that about effectiveness rating. Although we have different rating levels, which are ones that are fully effective, that is the work within the 80 to 100% effectiveness rate. We have the partially effective, which is between 50 to 79 effectiveness. We have the ineffective or deficient, which is falls between 1 to 49, and then we have the non-existent controls that we have not tested. We don't know how effective it is, which is 0. We don't know, okay, if the control is effective or not. So you can implement a risk after testing it. You can now know the control effectiveness rating. Okay, now the next is the number of open risk items. Now, the number of open risk items is a core metric tracking all active, unresolved security risk or operational risks that have been identified but not yet fully mitigated. Okay, we have identified the risk, but we are still putting them under control. They've not been fully mitigated. Like I said earlier, you can decide to reduce a risk, reduce the effectiveness, the likelihood, and reduce the impact to an acceptable level. Now, when we reduce the likelihood and impact to an acceptable level, We are simply saying it is now something we can accept. So what did we do? We implemented two risk treatment strategies, which is what? Risk reduction, after risk reduction, risk acceptance. But if it is possible to completely resolve remove the risk, then you would have dropped the risk rating to zero. You can say, okay, this risk is closed. Although, because we say the risk is closed, does not mean we will not still monitor it. Are we clear? You can close the risk, but still monitor it to check if the control measures you use are effective. Okay? So I said I was going to show us a risk register. I have one here. So for that same Kestrel company that I said we're going to give you guys as an assignment, this is their enterprise risk register. Now, this is a brief overview of the organization. This is version 4.0 because they've probably done 4 different risk registers. These are the comments, executive dashboard, master risk register. This is the content, right? So now this is just the cover. After the cover, let's go into the executive dashboard. Now, this executive dashboard tells us the total